I never imagined I would see the day when I packed my bags and walked away from the house I once called home. But before that moment came, the story had been slowly unfolding, piece by piece, year after year. It did not start with shouting or anger. It began with silence. A silence that settled in the corners of my home like dust, ignored until it became impossible to breathe. My name is Amina, and I spent most of my life raising my son Adnan. As a single mother, we were close once. He would hold my hand even after he was tall enough to reach the kitchen shelves. "Mama, are you tired?" he would ask after school, and I would smile, shaking my head, because his concern was enough to keep me going. Those were simple days, small meals, small moments, but a big bond. When he married, I was happy, truly. I welcomed his wife Sarah with open arms. She was polite, gentle, and always smiled softly. I believed she would become another daughter to me. For the first few months, that feeling seemed real. We ate dinner together at the same table. They told me about their work, their plans, their dreams. I listened and laughed, grateful to not be alone. But slowly, things changed. It was not sudden, like rain that starts as a whisper before it becomes a storm. It began with closed doors. They used to talk in the living room, but now whispers traveled through the crack of their bedroom door. I told myself not to listen. They are young, I thought. They need privacy. But the house felt colder, somehow smaller. One evening, I placed dinner on the table, expecting them any moment. Minutes passed, then an hour. When I knocked gently and asked if they would come eat, Sarah replied, "We already grabbed something outside." Her voice was polite, but distant. The food on the table felt heavier than before. Later, small things continued. They stopped inviting me on short weekend outings. They planned meals I did not know about. Sometimes, I would wake up to find dishes washed and put away, as if they wanted to avoid eating with me at all. I asked Adnan once, carefully, while he scrolled through his phone, "Is everything all right, beta?" He didn't look up. "Everything's fine. Mama, you're overthinking." Maybe I was. But nights grew longer with thoughts that did not rest. I sat alone in the living room listening to the ticking of the clock, each sound reminding me I had become ... extra, not needed, not included. Still, I smiled through break, asked gentle questions, and tried to ignore the invisible distance stretching between us. I told myself, this is just a phase. But deep down, something inside me whispered, this is the beginning. And I didn't know then, but those quiet moments were the first steps toward the day I would pack my bags, wishing anyone would ask me to stay. The weeks that followed felt different, though nothing was said aloud. I tried not to take things to heart, but small moments have a way of piling up quietly. One morning, I woke up early to prepare breakfast, just like I always did. The smell of tea filled the kitchen. I placed 3 cups on the table and waited. But when they walked in, Sarah gently touched Adnan's arm and whispered, "Let's just grab coffee outside today." They did not even sit down. The door closed behind them as I stood holding the teapot, steam rising like unanswered questions. I told myself they must be busy. Plans change. It happens, right? Days turned into routines I did not feel part of anymore. I would hear laughter from behind their door, stories I was not invited to share. When I walked into the room, the laughter softened. Their eyes shifted. It wasn't cruel, just uncomfortable, as if I was a guest in my own home. Still, I helped where I could. I folded laundry, watered plants, cleaned quietly. I thought maybe if the air remained calm, the warmth would return, but warmth cannot stay if doors keep closing. One evening, while I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, I heard them talking in low voices. I did not mean to listen, but sometimes hurt finds its own ears. "She is always around," Sarah whispered. "We have no space. She raised me alone," Adnan replied quietly. "I can't just ask her to leave." "But we need our life too," she said. My hands paused. The knife rested on the board. Everything felt heavy. Space. That simple word pressed into my chest. I stayed still, hoping to disappear from sound. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed. The house was quiet. My thoughts were not. I wondered if loving too much could become a burden. Had I overstayed? Had I become the shadow in the hallway? The next morning, I decided to ask directly, "Are you both happy with me here?" My voice gentle, almost afraid. Sarah looked away while Adnan sighed. "Mama, maybe you should consider visiting relatives sometimes. Give us time." Visiting as if my presence was temporary. as if my roots in this house were shallow. I nodded slowly. Of course, I said, forcing a smile that trembled at the edges. For the first time, I felt invisible. That night, I could not sleep. I stared at the packed silence of my room, wondering how love could feel like weight. The house that once echoed with Mama was now quiet enough to hear my own heart whisper back. I clutched my pillow and thought, when did home stop feeling like home? I did not know it then, but this was the moment the idea of leaving found its first breath. Asterisk if you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. A few days later, the house felt unusually quiet. Adnan had left early for work, and I assumed Sarah was resting. I went to the kitchen to prepare tea, hoping maybe we could sit and talk, just the two of us. Maybe we could clear the silence that had grown between us. But as I reached for the cups, I heard Sarah on the phone in the living room. Her voice was tired, frustrated, and sharper than I had ever heard before. I cannot do this anymore, she whispered. She is always here. I feel like we have no control over our own lives. I froze where I stood, my fingers gripping the edge of the counter. My heart felt like it was no longer beating in the right place. A friend must have asked something, because Sarah continued, softer but still heavy. No, she is not rude. She is kind, too kind, and that makes it harder. I just want space. Those last 3 words sank deep. I backed away quietly, not wanting to hear more. Sometimes the truth is easier to hold in silence than in sound. Later that afternoon, I found her folding clothes in the bedroom. I gently asked, "Am I in your way?" My voice was calm, but inside, I felt as fragile as glass. She hesitated. Her hand stopped moving. "A little," she finally said, not meeting my eyes. "We need time to build our life. Just the two of us." It was honest, painfully honest. I nodded slowly. "I understand," I whispered, even though a part of me didn't. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of my bed. My hands rested on my lap, trembling slightly. I thought of the years I spent saving, worrying, praying for my son's future. I thought of the small joys, his school awards, his laughter, even the tiny arguments we had made up after. All those memories felt like warm threads. Now, they felt like loose strings. As evening came, the house filled with gentle noises, the clinking of dishes, light footsteps, but none of them reached me. I felt like a shadow moving through rooms filled with other people's hopes. When dinner was ready, they ate quietly without calling me. I stared at the ceiling, listening to their forks tapping, the muted whispers between them. The loneliness in that moment felt heavier than any suitcase I would eventually pack. Later, as I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water, I heard Sarah murmur, "She should think about leaving for a while." Adnan did not respond. That silence said more than words ever could. I stood there, unnoticed, and realized something important. Love cannot survive where it is not welcomed, even if no one says it directly. That night, as I lay in bed, a thought repeated itself like a quiet drum. Maybe it is time to go. And for the first time, leaving did not feel like abandoning them. It felt like protecting myself. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The house was still, even the curtains stood quietly, unmoved by any breeze. I sat at the edge of my bed for a long time, my hands resting on my knees, as if waiting for someone to tell me this was all just a bad dream. But no voice came. Only the soft ticking of the clock reminded me that time moves, with or without us. I looked around my room. This was the space where I kept old photographs, folded sweaters, and little pieces of my life. I opened the wardrobe and stared at my clothes. Slowly, gently, I began to fold them. Each piece carried a memory, birthdays, festivals, smiles. The suitcase lay open on the floor, and with every item I placed inside, a part of my past settled beside it. As I packed, I paused often, not because I was unsure, but because my heart needed moments to breathe. I found an old scarf Adnan bought me when he was a teenager. I held it close for a moment, then placed it in the corner of the bag. My hands shook a little. I told myself, do not cry. Not yet. After packing most of my things, I walked to the kitchen to make tea. The steam rose gently, and for a brief moment, I imagined the 3 of us sitting together like before. But that table was empty now, not just physically, but emotionally. I carried my cup back to my room and sat by the window, watching the sunrise paint the sky with soft colors. New beginnings, it seemed to whisper. A little later, Sarah knocked on the door. She looked surprised when she saw the suitcase. "You are leaving?" she asked, her voice uneasy. I smiled softly, carefully. Only for some time, I replied. You both need your space, and I need a little peace. She nodded slowly, unsure what to say. If that is what you want. It wasn't what I wanted, but sometimes, love means stepping back. When Adnan came home later that day, he noticed the suitcase by the door. Mama, what's going on? His voice sounded confused, maybe even worried. I tried to keep my tone steady. I will stay with a relative for a while. You both need time to grow, and I need time to breathe. He looked at me for a long moment. I searched his eyes for a reason to stay. A word, a hand reaching out. Anything, Bafta. He only said, if that makes you comfortable. Comfortable. Such a simple word, such a heavy wound. That night, I zipped the suitcase closed. The sound echoed through the room like a quiet goodbye. I sat on my bed and whispered to the silence. Maybe someone will stop me. Maybe someone will ask me to stay. But no footsteps came. The house slept peacefully, unaware that I was already gone in my heart. Asterisk. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need them. The morning I decided to leave, the house felt strangely calm. I woke up early and sat for a long moment at the edge of my bed, listening to the breath of the home around me, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the hallway clock. These quiet sounds had been my companions for years. It felt strange to say goodbye to them. I moved slowly, not wanting to disturb anything. I placed my shoes neatly beside my suitcase and folded a small blanket I used during colder nights. My hands shook only once, when I held a framed photo of Adnan as a child. His smile was wide, his eyes bright. He once belonged entirely to my world. I gently wrapped the frame in cloth and placed it inside the bag. By the time I stepped into the hallway, the house was just beginning to wake. I heard footsteps upstairs, soft, unhurried. I looked up the staircase, hoping someone might notice the suitcase, the shoes, the expression on my face. For a moment, a part of me whispered, maybe they will ask you to stay. But no one came down. In the kitchen, I brewed one last cup of tea. The steam curled upward, warming my face. I held it close, like an old friend I had to let go. I sipped slowly, tasting memories in every drop. The chair across from me remained empty. Then, I heard movement. Sarah walking into the kitchen. She paused when she saw the suitcase by the door. You are really going, she said, her voice caught between guilt and relief. I nodded gently. It is the right thing for now. There was a silence between us, not heavy like before, but soft and unsure. After a moment, she said quietly, I hope you find some rest. I nodded, accepting her words. I wished I could give her something kinder in return, but my heart felt fragile. When I turned to pick up my suitcase, Adnan finally appeared in the doorway. His hair was messy, and he rubbed sleep from his eyes. Mama, you are leaving now. I looked at him, searching for something: regret, hesitation, even confusion. But his face was calm. You should call when you reach, he said. That was all. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile. Of course, my hand reached for the doorknob. The metal felt cool, unfamiliar. I paused, listening again for footsteps, for a voice, for something like, stay, but the silence answered me instead. I opened the door. A gentle breeze wrapped around me, carrying the scent of morning leaves and distant traffic. I took one step out, then another. Each footfall felt like walking away from years of love, years of sacrifice, years of being needed. When the door closed behind me, it did not slam. It clicked softly, almost sweetly, as if to say, goodbye. I stood there, suitcase by my side, wondering quietly, will anyone open that door against to call my name? As I stood outside, suitcase in hand, I felt strangely light and unbearably heavy at the same time. The morning air was cool against my face. Birds chirped softly from the trees across the street. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. I wondered how the world could stay so calm when something inside me felt broken. I slowly walked down the familiar path to the bus stop. Every step felt like it carried a memory. I remembered walking the same road holding Adnan's tiny hand, guiding his uncertain feet. Now, here I was, searching for my own footing. People passed by, busy with their own lives. No one noticed the quiet tremble in my fingers. At the bus stop, I sat on the cold bench and placed the suitcase beside me. A few others waited: young students, an old man reading a newspaper, a woman humming softly. They all had destinations. I had distance. Distance from heartbreak. Distance from a home where I no longer fit. As I waited, my phone buzzed. I felt a spark of hope. Maybe it was Adnan. Maybe he realized something was wrong. Maybe but it was only a message from a relative, asking if I was still planning to visit. I typed back, yes, I am on my way. Before I could send it, I hesitated and looked back down the road. My house was still visible from where I sat. The curtains were drawn. No one was looking out. For a moment, I imagined Adnan bursting through the door, calling my name, running toward me like he used to. Nothing happened. I sent the message. The bus arrived with a soft hiss of its brakes. I stood up slowly, gripping the handle of my suitcase. As I stepped onto the bus, the driver gave me a tired smile. I nodded back and found a seat near the window. The bus started moving, and the road unfolded before me like a quiet goodbye. Through the glass, I watched my house grow smaller. My chest tightened. I whispered a prayer under my breath for them, for myself, for the love that got lost somewhere in the space between us. Minutes passed in silence. The bus rocked gently, but my thoughts were restless. Was I selfish for leaving, or was I finally learning to protect my heart? An elderly woman sat beside me and glanced at my suitcase. Traveling far? She asked kindly. Just for a while, I replied softly. She smiled. Sometimes a little time away helps us see things more clearly. I nodded, holding her words closely. Maybe she was right. As the bus turned the corner, the last glimpse of my home disappeared. I rested my forehead against the cool window and let a single tear fall quietly. Not because I was weak, but because love had nowhere else to go. I hoped, somewhere deep inside, someone would notice I was gone. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel so more people can hear these emotional stories. When I arrived at my cousin's home, she greeted me with warmth I had forgotten I needed. Her arms wrapped around me gently, and for the first time in months, I let myself lean into someone's embrace. She guided me inside, talking softly about tea and breakfast and the guest room she had prepared. I nodded, grateful for her kindness, but inside, I felt distant, like my heart was still sitting in that kitchen chair, waiting to be seen. Her house was smaller than mine, but it felt full of laughter from her grandchildren's drawings on the walls, full of life in the cluttered shelves and colorful pillows. Every corner had a story. I found comfort in that, in places where love still echoed. For the first 2 days, I rested. My cousin insisted. I slept longer than I had in months, as if exhaustion had been waiting for permission. At night, she would sit beside me and talk about ordinary things, the neighbors, the weather, the birds that nested outside her window, and I listened, letting her voice fill the quiet spaces inside me. On the third day, silence returned, not from outside, but from within. I sat on her porch, watching the sky shift colors as the sun leaned into evening. My tea grew cold in my hands. My cousin sat beside me. She didn't ask questions. She just stayed. Sometimes presence is more healing than answers. After a long pause, she finally said, "Homes change. People do, too. But you still matter, even when you feel forgotten." Her words felt like gentle hands holding something fragile inside me. That night, I turned my phone face down on the bedside table. I wondered if anyone had noticed my absence. Maybe the kitchen felt too quiet. Maybe my empty chair at dinner looked strange. Maybe someone reached for the extra cup of tea out of habit, then paused. Or maybe nothing changed at all. The next morning, I found myself scrolling through old photos, birthdays, weddings, holidays. In each picture, I stood beside Adnan, smiling with pride. But slowly, as the photos got newer, I moved to the edges, until eventually, I wasn't there at all. Time had pushed me out long before I walked away. I sighed and closed the album. Love is not erased suddenly. It fades like sunlight so slowly, you don't notice, until the room is cold. Late in the afternoon, my cousin asked, "Do you want to go back?" I thought for a long moment. My chest felt tight. "I don't know," I admitted. "A part of me is waiting for them to miss me. Another part is afraid they won't." She touched my hand gently. Healing does not always come from where we expect. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The house around me breathed softly. I whispered to the darkness, "If they truly care, they will reach out." Then I closed my eyes, not sure which answer would hurt less. Days passed quietly in my cousin's home. I settled into a slow rhythm, morning tea on the porch, soft laughter with her grandchildren, calm evenings spent watching the sunset fade into night. On the outside, everything looked peaceful, but inside, there was still a part of me waiting, listening, hoping that every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. I would hold it tightly, only to find it was a message from someone else, a friend, a neighbor, a distant relative, never from the house I had left behind. That silence spoke louder than any argument ever could. One afternoon, as I folded some clothes, my cousin sat beside me. Waiting does not mean you are weak, she said softly. It means your love is real. I nodded, but my eyes stung with quiet tears. Love is patient till one day it becomes tired. On the fifth day, just as I finished washing the dishes, my phone rang loudly on the table. I wiped my hands quickly and hurried over, expecting another wrong number, another silence disguised as sound. But when I looked at the screen, my breath caught. It was Adnan. My fingers trembled as I answered. There was a brief pause before he spoke. Mama, the house feels strange without you. I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. Does it? I whispered. Yes, he replied. We thought you were just upset. We didn't realize how you felt. I took a slow breath. Sometimes silence is a kind of pain, Beta. Sometimes people don't see the hurt unless they lose the place they used to find comfort. He exhaled shakily. Sarah and I talked. We should have listened. We should have asked how you were doing. Instead of assuming you were fine. The apology was quiet, but it reached places inside me I thought had gone numb. Mama, he continued, voice softer. Can you come home? We want to talk. Really talk. Tears slipped down my cheeks, not heavy, not angry, just gentle, like rain on dry soil. I will come, I said softly, but things need to change. We must find space together. When the call ended, I sat for a long moment, holding my phone against my heart. My cousin smiled from across the room. See, she said, love sometimes just needs a little distance to learn how to breathe again. The next morning, I returned home. When I opened the door, the house felt different. A small vase of flowers sat on the kitchen table. 2 cups of tea were ready. And in their eyes, I saw something I had been missing. Understanding. We sat together, no whispers behind doors, no silence like walls, just voices, soft and honest. Over time, the empty spaces became places to grow. We learned that family is not about living in the same house, but living in the same heart. Now, when I walk past my packed suitcase in the corner of my room, I smile, not because I left, but because I came back with courage. And sometimes, that is how love finds its way home. Thank you for listening to this story. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel so more hearts can find comfort in stories like this.